It began in the kind of darkness the palace prefers, thick, private, and impenetrable. The last of the staff had gone, the official lights dimmed, and the great windows of Kensington reflected nothing but the August moon. Somewhere beyond the wrought iron gates, London's night traffic hummed faintly, but inside, the silence was absolute. At precisely 12:07 a.m., a lone black Range Rover rolled to a stop at the discreet south entrance. Its passenger, Princess Anne, the indomitable Princess Royal, stepped out without ceremony, tweed jacket collar turned up, her new, softer hairstyle catching the light from a single wall sconce. No photographers were waiting, this was by design. The palace's private security had sealed the area hours earlier, citing routine maintenance on the gates. Anne's arrival was unannounced, unrecorded in the official log. Waiting inside the blue sitting room was Catherine, Princess of Wales, seated at a low table set with 2 cups of steaming chamomile tea. She had been in Windsor earlier that day, but the call had come from a mutual aid, urgent, confidential, and not for Prince William's ears. The 2 women greeted each other not with ceremony but with the quiet familiarity of family bound by purpose. On the table between them lay a stack of folders, each marked with discreet palace seals. To an outsider, they could have been anything: charity reports, correspondence, routine schedules. But inside were draft proposals that, if enacted, would alter the structure of the royal household in ways not seen since the early years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. This was the reshuffle. Anne, who turned 75 just days earlier and still maintained a workload of over 200 engagements a year, had been pushing for months to streamline operations. She knew the Crown's machinery was bloated, expensive, and, worst of all, vulnerable to criticism at a time when public trust was fragile. Catherine, fresh from her return to public life after months of cancer treatment, brought the perspective of the monarchy's future, younger audiences, digital presence, and a more approachable style of service. The king's recent health concerns, and his increasing reliance on senior family members, had created the window they needed. Windsor must look like it can breathe again, Anne reportedly told Catherine, sliding a document across the table. It was a proposed list of patronages to be reallocated before year's end, some to be merged, others to be retired entirely. High on the list were causes long associated with older royals whose schedules had slowed. Catherine's name was penciled beside several, including 2 major equestrian charities, and had led for decades. Another file dealt with residences. Balmoral and Sandringham would remain untouched, family strongholds, but underused Grace and Favour apartments in central London were under review. And had even floated the idea of converting one into a public exhibition space dedicated to the late Queen, an idea Catherine noted could turn criticism into affection. They spoke in low voices, punctuated by the occasional clink of porcelain. At one point, Catherine produced a slim, leather-bound notebook from her bag, its pages filled with handwritten notes. Insiders later speculated it was a compilation of her own observations from engagements over the past year: what worked, what fell flat, where the royal presence truly mattered. The most delicate matter, however, lay in staffing. Palace aides had grown used to entrenched roles and overlapping duties, but Anne was blunt: we can't keep paying for the same job twice just because it's in 2 buildings. Catherine agreed, but her approach was gentler: focus on retraining and redeployment to avoid public backlash. They agreed on a phased review, beginning quietly with departments least visible to the public. Rumours suggest Camilla was not in London that night, having travelled to her private estate in Wiltshire earlier that week. Still, her shadow loomed. Some of the proposed changes would shift influence away from her circle of trusted staff, a fact not lost on either woman. William's absence was even more conspicuous. While he was due at an early morning military briefing, the meeting's secrecy meant he would learn of its contents only later. By 2:30 a.m., the teapot was empty, and the folders had been sorted into 2 piles, immediate, and to be discussed. In the former were 3 initiatives: residence consolidation, patronage reallocation, and preliminary staffing audits. In the latter, more ambitious ideas: cross-departmental roles for younger royals, new protocols for international tours, and an overhaul of ceremonial events to cut costs without diminishing pageantry. Before leaving, Anne is said to have stood by the window, looking out over the moonlit gardens. The family's weathered bigger storms, she murmured, but this one's coming slow, and that's when people stop noticing the leak until it's through the ceiling. Catherine, gathering the files into her leather case, replied simply, "Then we fix the roof before the rain starts." At 2:43 a.m., and departed the way she had come, her car slipping back into the London night without a trace. The meeting would never appear on any public calendar, nor would its agenda be acknowledged. But within 48 hours, subtle ripples began to appear, aides quietly reassigned, upcoming engagements reshuffled, and a previously unannounced meeting of the Privy Council scheduled for the following week. To the public, it would look like the normal churn of royal life. To those who knew better, it was the first visible sign of a midnight pact, one forged not in the glare of ceremony, but in the quiet determination of two women shaping the crown's next chapter. By sunrise, the quiet ripples from that midnight meeting had begun to reach the marble corridors of Buckingham Palace. In the Royal Household's Operations Office, two senior aides received unexpected transfer notices, both moves framed as temporary reassignments to support upcoming events. In reality, according to one long-serving footman, the changes had been plotted in those folders Catherine carried back from Kensington. "No one gets shifted without a reason," he whispered over his morning tea. "Something's brewing, and it's not just for the King's diary." Camilla, returning from Wiltshire that afternoon, was said to be visibly cool when briefed. One source close to her confided that the Queen Consort questioned why she had been excluded from the discussion entirely, especially given her long-standing influence over ceremonial scheduling and staff appointments. "It's unusual," the source said. "Camilla's always had a say in household matters. For her to be out of the loop on this means someone wanted it that way." The same source hinted that Camilla had immediately called her private secretary to request a full list of recent staff changes, a sign she was already moving to assess the extent of the reshuffle's reach. Prince William's reaction was more contained but no less significant. Briefed in person by Catherine over breakfast at Adelaide Cottage, he reportedly listened in silence, tapping the edge of his coffee cup. "If it steadies the ship, I'm with you," he told her at last, though aides say he privately voiced concern that moving too fast could create unnecessary noise in the press. His support, even cautious, would be vital. Without it, the reforms risked being interpreted as a solo venture by Catherine and Anne. Within 48 hours, subtle changes began surfacing in public schedules. An official announcement from Clarence House confirmed that several patronages would be reassigned in the coming months to reflect evolving priorities of the royal family. The statement was characteristically bland, but seasoned royal correspondents noticed the significance. Two of the charities listed were ones Anne had championed for decades, and the incoming patron was none other than Catherine. The press, never one to miss the scent of intrigue, began speculating. The Daily Chronicle ran the headline, "Palace in Quiet Transition. Patronage moves hint at bigger shake-up." The Guardian noted the unusual alignment between the Princess Royal and the Princess of Wales, describing their cooperation as a generational bridge with strategic intent. Social media lit up with commentary, from monarchists applauding the efficiency drive to Republicans arguing it was evidence the monarchy was circling wagons against public accountability. Inside the palace, the whispers grew louder. Staff in the household's finance department reported an urgent review of maintenance costs for certain Grace and Favour residences. An internal memo, leaked to a tabloid, revealed plans to consolidate several administrative offices into a single hub within Buckingham, a move projected to save over £1 million annually. The memo bore no signatures, but those familiar with the midnight meeting claimed to recognize the phrasing as distinctly Anne's. Camilla, meanwhile, made her own countermove. At a charity luncheon 2 days later, she delivered a carefully worded speech praising the steady hands that have kept our traditions alive, and warning, almost in passing, that change for change's sake can erode what makes us who we are. It was received politely in the room, but among the press corps, it was widely interpreted as a veiled critique of the ongoing reshuffle. Catherine and Anne pressed on. They convened again, this time not in person but via a secure video call set up by the palace's IT team, another anomaly in a world that still prefers face-to-face discretion. On the agenda, the next phase of the plan. This included reassigning ceremonial duties to streamline the King's workload and introducing a trial program for hybrid engagements, combining in-person appearances with virtual elements to cut travel costs. "The world expects us to be seen," Catherine noted, "but they also expect us to be wise with what we spend." One of the most contentious proposals, still marked confidential, involved rethinking the lineup for the next Trooping the Colour. Traditionally, the full roster of working royals appears on the Buckingham balcony. Anne argued for a smaller, more cohesive group to project unity and purpose, while Catherine suggested integrating younger royals in more visible roles to signal continuity. Either change would inevitably alter the visual symbolism of the monarchy, and invite commentary from every corner. By the end of the week, the so-called palace reshuffle was no longer a whisper but a topic of open discussion among royal watchers. Even BBC commentators, usually cautious, noted an unmistakable shift in the gravitational centre of the royal household. The phrase stuck, reappearing in print, online, and on talk shows. And while the king himself remained silent, his absence from several scheduled engagements was explanation enough for those willing to read between the lines. Late on Sunday evening, as the palace settled into another quiet night, Catherine reviewed a sheaf of new briefing notes by lamplight. One page, in Anne's unmistakable handwriting, contained a single sentence underlined twice: "We've set the course, now we see who follows." Catherine folded the paper into her leather case, aware that the coming weeks would test every inch of their plan. The reshuffle had begun, but its final shape, and its political cost, were still unwritten. For now, the alliance between the Princess Royal and the Princess of Wales held firm. But in the game of royal politics, even the most carefully laid plans can be undone by one public misstep, one leaked conversation, or one illness in the wrong place at the wrong time. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, the next challenge was already forming. And when it came, the midnight pact would either prove its strength, or fracture under the weight of the crown itself.